am definitely very competitive, which I think in business is good. You need to want to win to succeed. I think you fail every day in life. You make decisions that go wrong literally all the time. Better to make decisions and go wrong than not make any decisions and be in paralysis. More often than not, you're much better focusing on the here and now, on proving you're doing an amazing job at what you're doing. And when you do that, you'll get recognized. Get with it on sustainability. This is not a passing fad. It's a super industry. Don't hesitate to work in it.
Welcome to Sports and Outdoor Mentors. In this episode, I chat with Richard Collier, the CEO of Jack Wolfskin. We filmed the episode at their impressive global campus in Idstein, Germany. Jack Wolfskin employs more than 1,600 people around the world, operates 170 of their own stores, and is sold in more than 40 countries around the world. I chat with Richard about life before Jack Wolfskin, including when he was a middle distance runner sponsored by Adidas, his time at Helly Hansen, and his approach to now transforming Jack Wolfskin into a global brand. But before we get into the episode, I have one favour to ask. Please hit the subscribe or follow button. This helps us to continue elevate the content and bring more insights from even more amazing industry leaders from the sports and outdoor sector. Thanks for your support and see you soon. Richard, so before your professional career, you were a middle distance runner. Did this time as somebody that was clearly very competitive, how has that kind of influenced your career? You know, what have you taken away from that period?
Actually, quite a lot. I mean, one is that I am definitely very competitive, which, I think in business is good. You need to want to win to succeed. So that's there for sure. But I think also, especially what I did, which was distance running and middle distance running, you need to be pretty disciplined. You need to have a goal that you're working towards, and you need to be able to follow a plan to be able to reach a goal. So, those kind of things are drilled into you from, teenage years. Definitely helps. And also I was always, even though it's an individual sport, I was always part of teams as well. And you kind of get to enjoy working and being in a team environment as well through sport as well. So I think that definitely has pushed me in my career as well.
In your younger years, it wasn't all about sport. You went to an extremely well-regarded university in the UK, so Oxford, and studied, if I remember well, French and German. When you look back of that experience, what would you say is the best and worst of that experience when you kind of look back from a professional sense now?
Going to Oxford was an interesting one for me. I was just a normal comprehensive school lad from England, and was lucky enough to get in there through the grades I got at school. And going there was something quite different from what I'd experienced up till that point. Very different social circles, and just the whole atmosphere of being there is quite different. So that was quite a steep learning curve, to say the least. I can remember at the end of the first term, I said to my parents, I'm not sure I'm going to hack this one out, but they said, just keep going. It will get better. And it did. And a lot of it was actually because of the running side of things. I had a great, group of friends through that, and enjoyed that side of it. And then the academic side, I kind of picked it up and, worked my way through, and, doing French poetry from the 18th century was not really my favorite thing, but I learned to persevere and learned to get on with it. And, if you work hard enough, you can normally get to the finish line, and I managed to do that there as well. So it was a great experience. And I would say the other thing that I definitely picked up from there is lateral thinking. The whole way of teaching at that particular university is really about learning to think for yourself and, be independent in your thinking. And I think I follow that till today as well.
Okay, interesting. So actually the reality is probably today it's a much more, or almost everything else apart from the French and the German almost.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's the way that they teach you to think and to critical thinking. Not just accept everything, not accept, another person's point of view without challenging it, and the same to you. And so you kind of learn that debating and trying to find solutions, which I've found, very valuable in my career afterwards.
It's definitely a skill that I think is underappreciated somehow. And I think it's so important, especially in an industry where innovation should be what, helps us kind of drive forward as an industry. And sometimes I think if there's too much, or if people are not willing or a little bit afraid to challenge, you can end up in a bit of an echo chamber almost, where you're just kind of hearing the same things over and over again.
I agree. And I think it's also the types of backgrounds. I think a lot of people expect, a CEO in a company to come from a business education. Well, actually, I think it's quite good to come from more of a creative and, arts background because you do learn to think, and you learn to think out the box and be critical in your approaches to things in a different way than if you're just purely learning the business side of things. Of course, that's important, but I think it's actually quite an interesting mix to have that side of your personality and your education with the business side as well.
Absolutely. Well, maybe this will touch the business side. So you spent 25 years, a little bit longer, I think now, within the sports and the outdoor industry. So initially Addy, then 17, 18 years with Helly, and now obviously Jack Wolfskin. But before you joined Helly, you were for 3-4 years as a consultant. So looking back on that experience, what did you take away from that experience that maybe you put into action today or over your career, let's say?
The consulting was a massive game changer for me, because before that I'd been, working in product management, in marketing, and very, focused on the pure product side of things, pure marketing. Hadn't really thought so much about the business consequences and the P&L and balance sheet and all those good things. And then going into consulting was really, for me, it was kind of my equivalent of an MBA. I didn't do an MBA, but the consultancy definitely felt like a very intense MBA for the 3-4 years that I did it. Learned a lot from great mentors in that business, as well as the clients that we were working with and the problems that we were looking at the time.
Somehow then from your education side, it was more the creative, the more how to think and how to approach things. And then, as you said, then the consulting was maybe more that business side. Okay. So really great combination. When you look at it back over your time at Helly, so it was 17, 18 years, and I think you were leading the product creation teams during that time. Is there any one thing that stands out that you kind of took away from that experience that you've been able to utilize since you've been here at Jack Wolfskin?
I'd probably say it was actually people and culture, because when I joined Helly, it was kind of quite a great brand, obviously a lot of heritage, but it was not very dynamic at the time, and a lot of people had worked there a long time, hadn't really kind of developed with the industry where things were going, and it just felt a bit lost. And so, I felt as an outsider coming in, I was, just moved to Norway, English guy, I can rev things up here a bit. And I think I really helped, at that time, transform the culture to being, a lot more modern, a lot more dynamic, international, diverse, focus on innovation, product and marketing, to really drive the brand forward. So I think that kind of, getting the culture right was the big, change that I saw in my 17 years at Helly, from, something not being right at the start to having, when I left, I think it was, great culture, and I still believe it is today. I was pretty proud of that as well.
Absolutely. And so that's something that that you're working on with the team here as well?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's obviously, each company is very different, and you have to look at it, but some quite similar things arriving at Wolfskin, as I saw when I arrived at Helly. And obviously we're trying to, do that change a lot quicker here. And, some of it is really down to making sure that we've got the right competences, the right capabilities, and even the right mixes in our teams. So we've worked a lot on that in the last 3 years to really set the tone within the business and make sure that we have the right people, the right way of working, the right attitudes, and I think it's really starting to pay off now.
And when you say the right mixes, do you mean nationalities or kind of educational backgrounds or professional backgrounds?
It's a bit of everything. So it is definitely nationalities, it's genders, it's ethnicity, it's creativity, it's ways of thinking. You know, you just, it's a real, when you look at your team, I think you've got to look at the balance of people and make sure that you're getting enough of each thing that you need to kind of move the business forward, because, you know, the worst thing you can have is a bunch of clones. You know, I try to avoid people who are like me and try and find. I got some very good advice early in my career, which is always to hire people that are better than you. And, you know, I think that still holds today, you know, finding the experts in their fields and then kind of bringing that whole team together is super important.
And so you mentioned that when you started at Hella, you moved to Oslo, or you were working in Oslo. Of course, your family today still lives in Oslo, so you're doing commuting kind of backwards and forwards. Are you able to, I mean, I've personally done that, but Helsinki to Geneva or Annecy, so I know that's tough. Are you able to find a good balance with that? And if you are, you know, what's your secret?
This is a tricky question. Yeah, no, I mean, it is for sure tough. You know, for me, I've always traveled a lot with my job. In both Addy and Helly Hansen, I traveled a lot to both Asia and North America. So I was there, I was kind of permanently on jet lag, if I can say it like that. Whereas at least within my role now, a lot of the travel is just European, and you don't have jet lag, and that's nice. So, you know, I'd say that's the kind of benefit of the type of traveling I do now. You know, is it tough at times? For sure. When you're on the kind of last flight home and it gets delayed and you end up getting home at 3 a.m. and getting up again at 7:30 for your first meeting. Yeah, I mean, those days are tough, but hey, it's something I chose myself. So, you know, that's how it is.
And is there anything that you would kind of consider a non-negotiable in to ensure that you do find that right balance and you are able to spend that time that you need with your family?
Well, I think the non-negotiable is if my family say enough is enough, then it's enough. So that's the tipping point for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. And looking at doing a little bit of research, it's, as I already touched on, obviously, when you said yourself, so when you were younger, you're a middle distance runner. And obviously, I guess at a reasonable level, because you were sponsored or at least supported by Addy back in the day. But now it looks like cycling and Nordic skiing maybe has taken over that. So what role does sport and that activity play in your life now, and maybe the outdoors as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been essential. I've always, you know, since being a small kid, I've always been super active and getting outside. You know, started actually with football, was, you know, on the football pitch till my parents called me in when it got dark at night. You know, I was definitely one of those kids, and then moved into running over time as a teenager and kind of got that, and just the ability to kind of get outdoors and get that fresh air and, you know, come back from a run and you just always feel fantastic. You know, don't always feel great during it, but when you get back, there's that buzz that everyone knows. And yeah, I think that was early on was something that was super important for me. And then when kind of injuries took the toll and life and kids and business kind of got in the way, then couldn't really run as much, and then found some new sports that I really enjoy, and, you know, love biking, so both road and mountain and gravel. I do all of that, and then in the winter I definitely ski a lot. I do Nordic skiing, but I also do a lot of downhill as well, especially with the kids now. They're faster than me, but I still just about can keep up with them on those on the black slopes. Yeah, not much longer.
What do you see as the benefits for you? I ask because I think over the last 12 months, I think I've personally been through some kind of a journey around exercise and realised that, at least for me, I do it actually much more from a mental point of view rather than a physical point of view, although arguably I could probably do it more from a physical point of view. But What about for you? I mean, obviously you're having a stressful role. So do you find that doing that exercise kind of helps with kind of getting
no, for sure. I mean, it's if like at the moment I've got an injury and I can't train, it's a nightmare because you don't have that release to get out and think about something different. You just have that hour where you don't think about work or don't think about anything that's going on in the day. You just kind of being there in the now, doing your sport. That's super important for me to have that, and especially if you can do it in the outdoors. It's that's a joy. And I think also I've gone from, well, I'd say that kind of competitive performance type of sports person. I'm trying to stop being that. But I struggle to just kind of do it for the enjoyment and for the mental side of it. I still like to push myself pretty hard, and that's why I get injured.
So when you look back over your career, who are the people that have influenced you the most professionally?
Had a lot of people. I mean, as always, I think your teams and your managers always have some kind of influence. Whether good or bad, I think you kind of learn and pick up things from everybody you work with. In terms of kind of role models for me, I would say my first one was Adidas. There's a guy called Michael Pivotto. He doesn't work there anymore, but at the time he was kind of definitely the footwear guru, and I think he taught me that when you work in product, you've got to be pretty thick-skinned. You got to believe in your ideas and you got to go for it. And, that was kind of coming in and seeing his bravery was like, wow, that's how I need to be. If I'm going to, be successful at making product, you can't just do what everybody else wants you to do. You've got to have a way and go for it. And, Michael was unbelievable at that, and, definitely learned a lot from him. And then, from the business side, like we talked about earlier when I was consulting, there's a lady, Dorothea Ann Stockham, who was my manager at the time, and she was a machine. Just, she could, from not only a work ethic, but just in a way of working and like the uber professional. And, that really taught me, kind of coming from like the happy-go-lucky mid-early 90s of Adidas to like you're now a consultant and people paying a lot of money for your hourly advice. You better be damn professional. And, learning that from Dorothea has been fantastic. And I've actually used her as a consultant, both at Helly and at Wolfskin, as an advisor more for me, some specific projects, but also just as an advisor to kind of work through difficult issues.
Oh, great. It's great that you've been able to kind of carry that through. That's excellent. And I think your point about what you learned from Michael, that having the courage of your convictions to go your own way, I think almost in any leadership role that mindset is really important, because I think it's, again, I guess going back a little bit to what we talked about earlier, it's very difficult to kind of get caught up in kind of what the mass think, rather than, really finding your own way and believing in that and fighting for it, which again, from a point of view of innovation, is, I think, so important.
Yeah, for sure.
I think there's a lot of Me Too kind of product and brands out there. So I think, that need from a leadership point of view to believe in something and really fight for it is vital for the industry, actually, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. We work in a super competitive industry. There's a lot of amazing brands. And if you don't stand for something, and if your products don't stand for something and they don't stand out, then why? And I think I always tried to push the teams to be, ask the so what question when they're presenting a product. Like, can the world live without that? Then, probably shouldn't be making it.
Especially right now, with the focus on sustainability, the fact that, if we were to be truly sustainable, we wouldn't be making a lot of product. So I think, asking that question makes even more sense now, because the last thing we need is just more more of the same. So yeah, something different is going to be critical. In your current role, what would you say is your most important task as the leader of a global business?
I would say it's kind of probably two elements. One is strategy. So what's the path? What are we working towards? Who do we want to be? Where are we going to be in 4 or 5 years' time? And giving people the conviction to say no as well, because when you have a strategy, you can do the things that you want to do, but you can also say no to a lot of other things, which means people can focus. So strategy is I think has to come from the top. It has to be worked with the team, but I have to be the kind of the ultimate bearer of that strategy, and I repeat it regularly just so we don't forget it, and it's kind of at the top of people's minds. And I definitely learned that from one of my CEOs when I worked at Heli. He was fantastic at that, and I think that's a critical thing. And then the second thing is be the leader of the people. You're there to inspire and push and help the people. You're really the it's chief exec officer, but really it's chief enabling officer. You're the one who can kind of pull everything together. If someone's got a problem and there's ways to fix it, then the person who's got the most ability to do that in terms of pushing the right buttons is the CEO. And I try to do that for people as well.
And are you able to find the right balance of the amount of time that you spend on that? Because I guess as being Jack Wolfskin, obviously being part of a larger group and a public company, I'm sure there's you have lots of tasks from a group perspective as well. So how do you find the balance to support the team and to give the team that guidance?
I'd say that's actually not that tough for me. I'm quite lucky working for Topgolf Callaway brands, because they are, for me, they're a great owner, because they really are quite, when it comes to overall brand strategy, commercial decisions, channel decisions, product marketing decisions, they're very hands off. They want us to own the brand and define the brand and the path forward. So, I spend one meeting a year where we discuss those kind of things. And then the rest of the deliverables that we have as a corporation is more on the financial side, so making sure that we're providing the right numbers and hitting our numbers and doing all that good stuff. So I think that's it's of course it's part of my role, but it's not an overwhelming part of the role, and I definitely have the most time to work on this business rather than just the reporting. Now the finance guys, they obviously have to do a lot of work on that, but as a CEO here, it's pretty okay.
What are the qualities you look for when you're looking to bring in new leaders to your business?
Well, I'd say it depends on the position, first and foremost. So, you've got to have somebody with the right experience to do that specific job. That goes without saying. Then I would say it's their personalities. Are they going to be a cultural fit with Jack Wolfskin? You can kind of see someone straight away, like who's going to walk in here and be, a hit. You kind of get that feeling straight away of the type of people that will work. As I said earlier as well, I think it's also not just that person. It's about how does that person integrate into the team that they're working in, whether it's the senior leadership team or their specific functional team. There's got to be a good balance in there of different characters, personalities, nationalities, all those things to get the right level of thinking within the group, that it's not just all me too. We try to be quite flexible in our approach of who we bring in based on what the role is, what team they're in, and what we're looking for at that time.
Do you look for people outside of the industry? So people, to come in from, I don't know, whatever different industry to bring something different?
I think it depends on the brand. I think, here at Wolfskin, especially in anything that's been, consumer facing, we're trying to bring people in from the industry, because we felt that it was, we were a little bit insular. We kind of we understood Jack Wolfskin, but we didn't really understand necessarily the wider outdoor world, the international outdoor world. And so we've been trying to bring in a lot of people with international backgrounds, but who have worked in at least the sports industry, but preferably the outdoor industry. have a good understanding of the competitive set, what it takes to win in this industry. And, that's been our focus right now. There's definitely a time and a place to, in product and marketing, if you bring somebody in from FMCG, they're amazing at consumer focus, consumer centric thinking, category thinking. But quite often they don't know how to make a garment or make a shoe or something like that. So it's, you have to think of that balance to get it right. So honestly, my preferred option is to bring in people from the industry on those type of roles. Now, when it comes to logistics or finance, then of course, any background is normally okay. But even there, it helps if people understand kind of the business, the processes, what happens in our world, rather than having to teach them everything.
Do you today work with a mentor or a coach on a regular basis? And if not today, is that something you've done in the past?
Well, I would say that my boss at Callaway, at Topgolf Callaway Brands, Joe Flannery, he's kind of like a mentor. He's the EVP for all their apparel brands. So yeah, he's my direct boss, but I think, we're both at kind of an age and a maturity that is definitely more like a mentoring thing of where, I'll go to him like, hey, I've got something that I'm working on, thinking about, what do you think? And to be honest, he'll do the same back with me as well. And we'll try and help each other. So yeah, Joe's probably fills that role now.
How do you manage your relationship with technology?
What type of technology?
Anything digital. So let's say phones and computers, iPads.
Yeah, I think I'm, like anybody, it's pretty essential these days, and I'm definitely a phone guy more than an iPad guy. So I'm pretty fast on my on my phone. Spend too much time on it, like probably most people do. But again, try to also be conscious when I'm back home and with the family, not to always be on that. And we definitely have, a rule at home that when it's dinner time, nobody in the family is allowed on the phone. And we, 3 teenagers, that's not always easy, but we try to stick to that. So yeah, technology is massive. And you just think sound really old when I'm saying this, but when I started at Adidas in 1993, in my first role, I was having to send faxes to arrange as an intern, to arrange a basketball tournament, street ball tournaments across Europe, getting visas, doing all that kind of stuff by fax. So you send something off and maybe you get a reply in 3 days or a week, and you don't know if your fax has gone through. So the kind of speed and just the ease of doing business now, like certainly for my kids, they can't believe like that we're that old and we had that that little technology when we kind of started out working.
Yeah, it was very similar for me. Yeah. Very similar. That's good that you have that rule at home. But what about professionally? I mean, because I think it almost can take over our lives a little bit, technology. You said you had that rule at home about not having phones on the tables. What about professionally? Is there something that here within Jack Wolfskin that you have rules or guidelines around the use of technology?
No, we've not done anything there yet. I know it's a discussion about not sending mails late or doing like that. I think we're quite well protected in Germany anyway, because as the headquarters is here in Germany, by law you're not allowed to work more than 10 hours a day, and we definitely don't encourage people to do that. So therefore, a lot of people, when they finish, they finish. Some of us, of course, are checking mails too late and doing all that, but there's definitely no expectation that you should be answering mails in the middle of the night. I mean, anything but. And I think you also have to be careful, and I think we're quite respectful of that with a global business that, we have an owner who sits in California, which is 9-hour time difference. We have our second biggest market is China, which is 7-hour time difference the other way. So, you could easily put in 24-hour shifts. So we clearly don't want that. And our colleagues in the US especially are very good at, starting their days relatively early to make sure that we, are not being asked to do late nights for them all the time.
So what would you say is your biggest failure, and how did you get over it, and what if anything did you learn from it?
I think you fail every day in life. You make decisions that go wrong literally all the time, and that's okay. You've got to. It's better to make decisions and go wrong than not make any decisions and be in paralysis. So, I definitely live by that. I mean, I think I had a time in Heli where we were asked to buy a lot of product to kind of gear up ready for a sale of the company. And deep within, I knew it was not a smart thing to do. And, looking back on it now, I should have fought harder and really, kind of tried to put my foot down and really objected, but I didn't. And, that was then tough for the company for probably 12, 18 months after that. So those kind of things where you have a clear view, probably a factual view of like, this is not the right thing to do, but sometimes you just let it go. They're the ones that I probably regret the most. Like, you should always push. And at the end of the day, if you've pushed, then at least you've given an objection. And, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, but at least you've made your voice heard, which I think is only fair.
You mentioned there that failure is somehow inevitable, or it's not something to necessarily be afraid of. And is that something culturally that you try and instill here? And what's your approach to that? Because I think that's something that's quite difficult in this day and age. I think people tend to be quite risk averse many times, and I think again that can have a negative impact from an innovation perspective. Yeah. So how do you approach that with the team?
No, I mean, I definitely talk about that very openly, that it's okay to screw up as long as you learn from it. So, and I think that's kind of, a lot of people are realizing that now, that you have to tell people as well, because I certainly felt when I arrived here at Wolfskin, there was a bit of a culture of fear of failure. And so people didn't want to take risks. They always look back in the rear view mirror to say, do we have facts from the past that's going to prove what we should make or how we should market the products? And that kind of takes you down a very narrow street. And I think I tried to be very clear to people, like, give things a go. Let's see. Maybe it worked, maybe it doesn't. And yeah, I think people now are realizing that's okay. And then when there is a problem, speak about it openly. It's like, most people, I would say 99.9% of people working in this industry, not just at Wolfskin, are trying to do a good job. So, if something's gone wrong, let's look at what were the circumstances. It's probably a bunch of different things have happened, bunch of different people have made decisions. It's rarely that one person has really screwed up. So just talk about, again, from an old boss, the moose on the table, he used to say, put it there. He was Canadian, and talk about it and find out so that you as a team can learn from it.
In Finland, I think it's a cat on the table. It's very bizarre. It varies.
A moomin on the table in Finland, maybe.
Yeah, good point. When you took over as CEO here, there was, in the kind of initial press releases, there was a lot of discussion around transformation of the company and internationalization. There we go, I got it right. So 3 years later, almost 3 years later, what are the strategies that you put in place, and how are you seeing that pay off now?
Yeah, so I mean, we had 4 kind of main pillars of the strategy when we set out in, basically it was early 21 when we had the strategy in place. First one was, we called it the brand reset. So really we wanted to say, everything we do with product, everything we do with marketing, every touch point that we have with the consumer, we want to relook at it. So, that resulted in basically a complete new product range, a new logo for the brand. So, updated, more contemporary logo for the brand. It's updated in a new store concept. It's updated by having a completely new look and feel on our website, on our, all our digital platforms. And the way we work with ambassadors, the everything from a brand side, I think we've done actually a really good job on that. Now, is there areas of it that we still think we can do even better? For sure. That's why we all have jobs. But I think we've really modernized and looked at the brand in a different way and made sure that we were pushing, which I felt it needed to be. It felt like the brand had got in a bit of a rut and we were like pulling it out and pushing it forward, and that's well underway. The second part of it was more about the company, and that strategy we called rapid modernization. It was Wolfskin had been through a bunch of different ownerships in the prior 20 years. And most of them were fairly short-term ownerships, for good reasons. And during those short-term ownerships, nobody had really invested in the kind of backbone of the company. So we kind of inherited a lot of self-made software systems that were kind of outdated, weren't in line with the best-in-class solutions that are out there today. Processes that had kind of not moved forward, and actually a lot of systems that were going literally out of date and were not going to be supported anymore. So we had a very urgent need to modernize. So we've updated our ERP system. So we implemented SAP. We've done our warehouse management system. We've done our product line management system. We're doing our B2B selling system in 3 weeks. We're doing our HR system, you name it. And that's just the big ones. And then there's all the other stuff there. So it's been a massive haul on the operations and IT side, which was, doing that in the middle of the pandemic, especially the ERP, the SAP implementation, when you couldn't have people sitting together in a room to talk about the challenges, was really, really hard. But we've got through it, thankfully. And now we've kind of stabilized the business, and we're now, putting all these, because they're great tools, it's just difficult to get them going. But now they're kind of going and helping us on the path forward. And I think linked to that was also unclear process. So who does what, clear races for everybody in the organization. So all that's kind of sorted out. And then when you have that and a brand that's kind of going in the right direction, then you're ready for internationalization. And internationalization is kind of two parts. One is mindset. So Jack Wolfskin's obviously always been, since its founding in the 80s, has been super strong in Germany and the DACH region in general. Not always been so strong outside of that region. So we needed to get people here in the head office to realize, they are servicing all markets, not just this region. We've got to be relevant for all the markets that we are working in, whether it's product or marketing or services, operations. We've got to be, have our stuff together in all of those areas. So that was kind of one part of internationalization. And then the second one was, what's our geographical strategy? And we clearly said from the start, the DACH market is our core, but we want to build a adjacency around that core with markets that could eventually become part of the core. So for us, that's, Belgium, Holland, Poland was previously a really good distributor. We brought those guys in-house. We acquired them, Italy, and really building that kind of strong European base, but then having our big growth engine to be China. China's already our number 2 market, and we think we can, double the size of that business in the next 3 or 4 years. If we're not a top 3, we're probably a top 4 outdoor brand in China today, but we can easily be top 2, top 3 when we do that with the business. So working hard on growing China. And then we have our kind of, long-term bet, shall we say, is North America. So Wolfskin's not really been present that much. Obviously, with the ownership that we have now with American ownership, we believe that we can succeed in North America, but we also know it's going to take time. So we're doing a kind of slow rollout of the brand there, working primarily on e-com, but then finding key specialty partners to build the brand and build the awareness and gradually build it up over the time. So that's what we're doing on international. And then the final part of the strategy was people and culture. So to do all of that, you got to have some great people. You've got to have a culture that's working, and you've got to have the right capabilities and competences in the business. So we've done a huge amount of work on that, both on a training point of view, a development point of view, but also, changing people as well. We've had to do that. There were some people who weren't ready to go on to the next phase of the journey, and I think we've now done that work, and very happy with the team that we've got here, and the culture that we're building on the campus here in Germany, but also in all our offices around the world.
You have a strong focus to grow internationally. There must be some pressure somehow, or difficulty almost, in maintaining the authenticity of the brand, of who you are at core. And also probably you're getting requests internationally for, okay, this is particularly relevant in China or North America or wherever it might be. How do you kind of address those needs, but also maintain that brand authenticity? I mean, the core of who the brand is.
It's a good question of how to do it, but I do believe in both global and local, and you need to have a strong brand core. So the brand core has to be crystal clear for everybody, and from that core, you should be able to say to a market what's right and what's wrong in terms of the brand. So for us, our main activity, for instance, is hiking. So that's kind of the core of what sporting activity a Jack Wolfskin consumer does. Now, when you go to China and you go hiking, it's hot. It's really, really hot. So they need a different type of hiking gear, so light hiking, which actually now what we're seeing is, yes, we're kind of building these light hiking collections for China, but as the world warms up in North America, in Europe, those collections are perfect for over here as well. So I think most of the time you can actually have a global collection, but with local focuses. So one part of the collection might be more relevant for one market than as another, but that's okay as long as it's all around the core. We're also quite lucky because we actually have a design and development group in Asia who do especially local fits. And then also if we see there's opportunities in the market that would never resonate here or in North America, then they can go after that, obviously with our backing. So that's it's a nice setup to achieve that.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that seems to be a core pillar of the brand is a sustainable approach in the way you work. But again, how does that translate internationally? Because I think, again, the levels of maturity on this topic vary quite dramatically in different markets. Some markets, particularly the Nordics in Germany, there's a lot of consumer awareness and sensibility on these topics. But in other markets, even North America, I would say comparatively to some European markets and China, it's not the same. So how do you deal with that? Do you kind of, again, have that kind of local approach?
I would say I think you have to set the bar where it's highest on sustainability. So, Europe with regulation, with consumer expectations is the highest. And I think we try to set our standard to Europe. And from a storytelling point of view, we're trying to also kind of push those stories, and our information into China, into North America, even though the consumers maybe not there yet, we think it's going to happen. Certainly I've seen in China for the first time, people are talking about sustainability. North America, definitely. We're trying to say, well, irrespective, we're going to have a strong point of view on sustainability and do the right thing in all markets.
And looking back, I mean, if you knew you weren't going to fail, would you do anything differently?
I think people decisions are the hardest things. I think by nature, I want to give people a chance and really prove. I think in some cases, maybe it took too long to say, this person is right for the role or wrong for the role, and, could have moved quicker on that and probably would have seen results quicker by making the changes that, eventually got done. It's when people are involved, it's hard and it's feelings, and, we're all human, and you have to kind of try and find what's the right time to do it. And, I think looking back, I probably should have moved a bit earlier on some of those types of decisions. But, I think I also tried to do the right thing. So, yeah.
That's interesting. I have I don't want to call it a regret, but a similar feeling about my time at Salomon actually, is that exactly the same thing. In retrospect, I should have moved a little bit quicker. But yeah, it's when it's humans involved, people involved, these are tough decisions.
Yeah. And I think it's whether it's, people moving into a new role or a sideways step or even out of the company, they're all big decisions and they affect people's lives. So, they shouldn't be taken lightly. But if you want to move the business, you have to make them. And it's the hardest decisions, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Something a little lighter. So what's your favourite piece of sports or outdoor gear? And don't say anything that's Jack Wolfskin. That's way too easy.
Well, I just bought a new bike in Spain. I've got a place in Spain where I do a lot of biking, and I bought a Ridley Phoenix, which is magic on the roads down there. So, I would say that's probably my favorite piece of gear right now.
I did wonder if you were going to say bike. I think I saw a photo maybe of the bike on your...
Quite proud of that one. It's nice.
Yeah, it looks cool. Very cool. And what about, or maybe you've already somehow alluded to this, but favorite piece of technology?
Yeah, I think it would probably be boringly my iPhone.
Yeah, it's funny. It's amazing. I think you're the fifth person that I've interviewed, and I'm pretty sure you're the fifth person that said iPhone. What one book, podcast, or any type of media would you recommend for somebody to read that wanted to enter into the sports and the outdoor industry?
There's an English writer, Matthew Syed, who used to be a Olympic table tennis player, and his writing in general is amazing, but he's also wrote a few kind of business books on, one's called Black Box Thinking and the other is, I can't remember what the other one is, but they're both on this kind of his approach to thinking and critical thinking and thinking outside the box. Super interesting reads and, give a good perspective on business, but doing it a bit differently.
And are you somebody that would, when you find a book like that you would read it several times?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Go back and refresh.
I'm not a huge reader of business books, to be honest. But when I find a good one, then it won't kind of be moved to the side. I'll definitely refer to it on occasion.
Yeah. I have really good intentions on that topic, but I read always before I go to bed. Yeah. And if I read a book like that before I go to bed, I fall asleep super quickly.
Prefer a good novel to that.
Yeah. What's the most valuable piece of advice you've ever received?
Probably from my dad. He was a local government accountant in the UK. So he worked for Nottinghamshire County Council for 37 years. And I think it's fair to say he didn't enjoy his job. And then he had a heart attack at 57. He was fine, but he decided he was never going to work a day again. And all he said to me when I then, around that time was also starting my career, he was like, just do something you enjoy, And I think that's absolutely the right thing to say to someone just starting on their journey.
Yeah. And you enjoy your job now?
Absolutely, yeah.
Really good advice. So if today was your last day here, what would be your parting message to your team?
Keep pushing. Don't turn back. You're doing the right things. Won't always work, especially today in the market that we're operating. It's a tough market environment, but we're doing the right things, and that will pay off in the long term.
For future leaders within the sports and outdoor industry, what 3 pieces of advice would you give them to guide them on their career?
Me in general on career planning, I'm not like a firm believer that you have to have this set career path, that you have to do things at certain times to achieve certain things. I've never thought like that. And I think more often than not, you're much better focusing on the here and now, on proving you're doing an amazing job at what you're doing. And when you do that, you'll get recognized, whether it be financially or, career step-wise. By doing a great job here and now, it's the best thing you can do for your career. Get with it on sustainability. It's, this is not a passing fad. It's the future of our industry. It's the future of innovation in our industry. And, if you're not prepared to embrace it. I think everyone's prepared to embrace it in our industry, but really push it and try and find new ways of doing things, then you're going to get left behind. So stick with it on sustainability and push it. Would definitely be advice for the future leaders of this industry. They're going to need to do it. Stay authentic and be core to the brands that you're working with. I think the temptation is always to go off and try and do new categories, new sports, new areas of, this is going to be amazing. Quite often or not, keeping a brand to its core is the most successful thing you can do. If you've got a strong core and a good reason of being for your brand, then stick to that rather than jumping on the latest fad there. And I think that's, always just general good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going back to the first piece of advice there, you mentioned that you never had let's say, a very clear career goal or plan, let's say. And obviously you spent, as we already discussed, 17, 18 years at Helly. But when you were there, because we've also discussed about your competitive nature, so did you have ambitions to ultimately lead a business one day?
I think other people had ambitions for me to lead the business in one day. For me, that was never an important thing. But I would, especially in the kind of later years after I'd been there some time, I had quite a lot of people kind of nudge like, oh, you're going to push for that. And I'm like, well, no, I'm kind of quite happy doing what I was doing. But then when somebody came to me and talked about a CEO position at Wolfskin and what the opportunity and the journey was going to be here, then I was like, oh, actually, yeah, I think maybe I'm ready for that now. Let's do it. And so it was kind of strange that people did talk about it in Helly, but it was only really first with Wolfskin where I thought, yeah, that could actually be a reality.
Have there been any surprises or things that you didn't expect in terms of being a CEO, not necessarily specifically about the day-to-day of the role, but just, anything that you're like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that?
I mean, definitely one cultural difference for me was moving from a Scandinavian company to being a CEO in a German company. The CEO in a Scandinavian company is kind of more one of the team. But then when I started here, I felt like people were putting me on this kind of pedestal, and I was like, all seeing, could make all decisions, knew everything. And I'm like, no, can't do that. So that for me was was strange. And I've, at least tried to do my bit here to say, I don't think that's the future here either. And I think you guys should consider your CEO to just be one of the team, and open door policy, and anybody can come and talk to me. And those things are not, I don't think they're that common here in Germany, but for me, it's my way of doing it. And, that was definitely something I wasn't expecting. I think the people side of it is massive. Your HR person is really a lot of the time is your right-hand person, because there are so many people, things to sort out, whether it's, small things or big things. There's always something going on with the staff, and you need to be there to make the final calls on what we're going to do and what's the right thing for the team. So I think those are probably the two things that stand out for me.
And that people aspect, because you have over 1,000 employees.
Yeah, we're just under 1,500 employees globally.
Does that responsibility, does it weigh on you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel a kind of responsibility for them, but I also think everybody's got the responsibility as well. So I know it's not just me. So I'm one of the 1,500. So I try not to think it's all on my shoulders. It's shared with everyone else, and people have responded to that. You don't want the business to perform badly, and financially you got to make sure everything's right, legally everything's right, so people have a proper platform to work with, and that's ultimately my responsibility. But other than that, I think it's okay to live with.
So the goal of this podcast is ultimately to help people within the sports and outdoor industry or outside that would like to get in on their career path. So considering that goal, is there anything else that we should kind of discuss or cover today? Anything else you'd want to bring up?
I think it's a great industry to work in. I mean, I can remember we had a sales meeting in Whistler where we were in this fantastic hotel, and Heli had one side of the building and this bank had another side of the building for their conference. And I just remember one of my colleagues standing up on the stage saying, "You could all be working over there. Be glad you're working here." And the whole place erupted, because it's so true. We work in a fun industry. We get to do amazing things around sport, around the outdoors. We, most of us get to travel quite a bit, see the world, learn to know fantastic people and cultures. It's a super industry. So I think don't hesitate to work in it. Reach out to people. It's actually quite a small industry as well. I think, certainly for people like us who've worked in some big brands as well, once you've done that, 10, 20 years later, you kind of know somebody in every brand in the industry. And that networking and that ability to talk to people, and most people are super friendly and willing to, share information, not about their businesses, but about, what's going on in the industry, how they can help. Is there anything you're curious about? Don't be afraid to ask.
Well, a brilliant way to finish. So thank you very much, Richard. I really appreciate your time. It's great to see what you're doing here. And I look forward to see how the brand continues to develop over the next few years, not the last few years, the next few years. So yeah, thanks again. And see you soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. We love to read your feedback, so please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks again for your support. See you soon, and don't forget to subscribe.